Hello, you're through the books, boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling?
This is Gary Braber calling. Yeah.
Gary, thank you so much for calling in. And we were actually just last month talking about your splendid book, which I still have beside me here.
Yes,
Rumor
good.
of Evil. Yes, thank you so much for sending it out.
Sure.
And I should acknowledge you were kind enough actually to give me a little personalization. We have a little note on the inside for my books boys friends in Northern Ireland. Thank you very much for that.
Yes, good.
And how are you doing today?
Doing fine. In fact, about 4 years ago, my wife and I were in Northern Ireland and doing the typical touristy thing. We were stopping at Belfast and Giant's Causeway and
Sure.
Londonderry's and had a great time. Yeah, it was wonderful. Yeah.
Nice. I My co-host lives in Belfast at the moment. I live in Lisburn, so it's just what 15 minutes away. But we're still County Antrim. So you've been around. What did you think of the place? You liked it, I
I
guess.
loved it.
You
Yeah,
have to
yes.
say
I mean,
that.
you know what the scenery is like. It was I was really taken by the Titanic Memorial Museum,
Sure.
which is amazing, and then some of the Neolithic sites. I think Knoth or Knoth. I'm not quite sure
Yeah,
how to
yeah.
pronounce it. And then the extraordinary formations of the Giant's Causeway, the rock formations. It's an amazing place.
The
Yeah.
causeway is very spectacular. I've actually never been to the Titanic Museum, surprisingly. I've been outside it a million times, but I've actually never gone inside.
All right. Where are you, in fact?
I'm in Lisburn, so I'm just a few minutes away from Belfast, 20 minutes maybe.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Right. Right. Yeah. We had an interesting time in Belfast. Had a great tour. Saw the wall and saw the stuff that was written on it. And I heard about the troubles a lot. And yeah, it was an amazing place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I want to talk a little bit today about your book. You've been so kind as to call in, and I read the book and we reviewed it on the show. Um, so let me ask you, how long have you been writing for?
This is my 10th novel, and it's almost 40 years. The first novel came out just about the time my first child was born, and then I put a it put a damper on it for about 10 to 15 years. But in the 90s, the others started coming out until this recent one. Yeah, but I was
Okay.
teaching full time at Northeastern University, so it was hard to juggle the time and get into it. But yeah, this is a I've been writing for almost 40 years. Yeah,
So that's a long period of time, and you mentioned there was a big gap in the middle as well. How has your style evolved during that time?
that's a good question. When I first started, I used to outline extensively, and at one point I had 90 pages single space. And I said, "Man, three of these, you got a novel." So, and about a third of the way through, you vector off in a different direction from what you had outlined,
Yeah,
and I said, "Why am I doing this?" So this last book, I just jumped in. It was a dark and stormy night, and went from there. And
yeah.
over the course of the time, um, I started writing shorter books. I
Hmm.
think the first one, Elixir, well, the fourth one, Elixir, came out in 2000, early 2000, and it was 500 pages. And people don't like reading long books sometimes, particularly in the mysteries or thrillers as these are.
Hmm.
So this is only about 320 something pages. I also became aware of how the world of readers was changing. The majority of books in America, at least, are purchased by women, often over the age of 50. So
Oh,
you have to
wow.
watch. Yeah, and about 80% of the books are purchased by women. It's also true of men's ties, also. And you have to watch out. You don't offend. You don't make a crass jokes about women or whatever. And
Sure.
and so yeah, there is another layer of editing that goes on. So one has to be aware of one's audience. Yeah.
Of course. It's
Yeah.
interesting you mentioned the style changing because if we look at two roughly contemporary authors, you've got crime books like Agatha Christie and comedy books like P.G. Wodehouse. And I always make this comparison because they're both short books. They both write 200-page books, both very
Right.
successful. Agatha Christie sat down and wrote with no preparation, really. P.G. Wodehouse wrote 100 pages of notes, like you were doing in the beginning, and then
Yeah.
edited it into a book. And it's interesting
Yeah.
you've got those two distinct styles that can both work.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And the thing is, one has to trust one's instinct that you're going to know where to go once you start something. I often leave a scene kind of open ended and hoping the next morning when I wake up I click back in. But yeah, and the style has changed. Also, I've gotten more psychologically intense in my character development, and know how to alternate action scenes with reflection scenes, action scenes with reflection scenes, so
Mhm.
that you give time to develop the characters while he or she is reflecting on what had just happened, and that's how characters are developed. Yeah,
Okay, so something happening, time to kind of take stock and it keep doing those essentially.
right,
Yeah.
right,
And
yeah,
and this particular book, you can maybe tell me, but we have, a lot of stuff set in the present, and then we have, a lot of stuff set 19 years ago. So
correct.
how does that change your process? Are you writing almost two separate stories and linking them up, or are you having to kind of do it together?
Um, the first thing you said is true. I knew that I was going to have a current investigation about a murder in the opening, discovered in the opening scene,
Hmm.
and I wanted it to connect to a cold case, a backstory from 19 years ago. So I have a file like any other crime novelist. I have a file of disturbing, strange crimes, real life crimes. And one came out of 2014 of a small town in Wisconsin, in which two 12-year-old girls lured another 12-year-old girl into the woods and they stabbed her 19 times.
Oh, goodness.
And when the police got them, they asked for an explanation and they said they were they were in the belief that they had to sacrifice their girlfriend to appease an online cartoon character known as Slender Man. As
I
long as
heard about this.
you heard about it, yeah.
Yes.
And they were free, and it's some kind of archetypal a Pied Piper who goes after children. And they believe if they didn't sacrifice their girlfriend, Slender Man would kill their families, which is certainly irrational. It's certainly crazy. But that fascinated me. And what particularly fascinated me is the research I did into bullying. And in the States, and I'm sure in the UK, adolescents, it's a scourge of adolescent life to be bullied by someone in school.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, psychologically, the damage. And that is what led me into this particular backstory of the girl from Slovakia coming to
Hmm.
town outside of Boston. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
interesting because she wants to fit in. She wants to Americanize a little bit, change her dress, make some friends.
Right.
She wants to fit in with the family. But at the end of the day, initially I was thinking, oh, this is a nice story. She's, Vadima, she's gonna fit in with them. But you're right. It is essentially a case of bullying when we boil it down. It is her not really being accepted by the friend group, and
Exactly.
and eventually them turning on her. Um,
Sure.
Now, the book is, of course, as you say, it's essentially a book about set with teenage girls. So, how do you go about it? Because approaching that, like, that's a totally different perspective than your own.
Right. Sure. One of the profiles of a bully is to go after someone who is perceived as being different, weak, soft. Physically, they may be overweight, they may be underweight, they may be tall and gangly, they may walk with a limp, and their behavior might be a little strange too. They might talk with a lisp or talk with a foreign accent, or they come from a different demographics. They're
Yeah.
poor, whatever. So ultimately, they pick on the outsider, and I tried to conceive of an outsider, and I made her an exchange student from a rural pig farm in Slovakia,
Yeah.
and of Roma extraction. And as things are going along, there's a pizza party in the story, and it's just after the kids have so much fun Americanizing her. But at a pizza party, she's doing palm reading, and something very strange happens. Then a few weeks later, bad things start happening to her friends there and the friends' families, and that starts the rumors flying that she's Romany. Aren't those gypsies? And don't gypsies put curses on people? And didn't they bring on the bubonic plague in the Middle Ages? And don't they drink the blood of Christian babies and pray to Satan? And aren't they witches in disguise? And
Yeah.
that is where the rumors started flying. Yeah.
And on one layer, you can think, well, it's silly teenage nonsense, but then you have to realize there's serious, dangerous ramifications of that.
Exactly.
And of course, the book explores that. You didn't shy away from tackling that topic about the sort of almost the racism, the prejudice against those people. You dive straight into that.
Yes, I got straight into that, but I also wanted to make it clear how dangerous it is that you take stereotypes of people and the rumors mount until someone might get hurt or killed,
Yeah.
and that's what I was dealing with. And we see this everywhere. In the United States, there's a issue with immigrant problems. You have immigrants, or they carry diseases, and they're going to crime. So it taps into that, but also in a sense it harkens back to 1692 in just outside of Boston, in Salem, Massachusetts, where 19 people were executed because they were accused of witchcraft.
Yeah, the Salem Trust.
Yeah,
It's
Salem Trust, exactly. Yeah,
it's crazy to think that we did that, but we did. That was a thing that happened in society, and even in Europe, we had medieval issues with people thinking that ladies were witches and everything. So it's been an ongoing thing. You also are not afraid to tackle. I mean, I don't want to kind of give too many spoilers about the intricacies of the story, but there is one part where the girl is actually also essentially being sexually abused by one of the adult characters in the book. And again, you're not afraid to jump into the tough topics.
Right. Yeah, it is a hot topic. And what is interesting about that, and we've seen this, police have seen this oftentimes, that why didn't the female go to the police, blow a whistle, and complain?
Yeah.
That this guy did this to me. Oftentimes when a woman is violated, she freezes. And this was interesting in terms of the research. Women freeze. They suddenly think, I brought this on. There's self-blame. I can't believe I was so violated. Don't want to bring that up to the authorities. So that I found very interesting. And also this young woman in the book, there'd be consequences if she blew a whistle.
Yeah.
If she went to the authorities. And I don't want to give anything away, but yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a tough subject to tackle, but it made sense in terms of yeah.
And how difficult was it to kind of put yourself in the perspective of a 16-year-old teenage girl to write it? If you ask me, I would have no idea how to start that,
Right. Well, I've had two kids who passed through their teenage years, and I knew their friends, and also having taught for over 40 years at Northeastern University, I get friends who are just 18 years old, and they're just about the same age as the female in the book. So I hear them talk, and I get the sense of their mindset and the paranoia.
Cool. And I mean, I think it's done well. It all seems realistic enough as well. So that you've done a very good job of it. What's next then? Have you started on the next book, or have you got some ideas?
Yeah, good point. This is the first of a series, and the contract I signed said we want you to do a series. So the second one is already done. It's called Heat of the Moment, and I'm partway through the third one, using the same two detectives, Kirk
and Mandy,
and Mandy, right, exactly. And they're fun to work with. I now know them, and they each have their baggage. One of the way to attract readers is not so much a detection, but the detectives. And it always makes sense to pick out a protagonist has the most to lose. So each one has baggage. The male, Kirk, is separated from his wife because a child was hit by a car a year or so ago, and they never got over that Great Depression. So they separated in their gloom. And Mandy is a woman married to a woman with a child, and so she is in a traditionally straight male profession, so she had to deal with that. So they each have their baggage and their demons to get over while they're investigating a case.
Yeah. And that's something I liked even reading this book, is that you see that they have their own lives outside of work. They're not one-dimensional characters. They've got their own stuff going on. Kirk's got his own separation and everything. I really like the stuff with personal relationships, so I like to bring that in, and that's really good. But of course, the thing that the main takeaway, and the thing that I never forget, is just thinking about what happens to the poor girl. What happens to Fatima. It's so sad, and I think that's the bit that I'll remember. In a year's time or whatever. That'll be my main takeaway. It's like, that poor girl.
Yes, for me too. I mean, I was pained writing some of those scenes.
Yeah.
But it made sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us all, before I let you go, where we can get the book?
Yes, right now it comes out next Tuesday, October 10th. But they can order it online, pre-order that on Amazon and Kobo and Google Play and many of the other online sites. Yeah, and hopefully in any bookstore in Northern Ireland, just by ordering it. Sure.
Fantastic. And do you have a website?
Pardon me?
Have you got your own website?
I have my own. Oh, yes, right. www.garybraver.com.
Perfect. I'll put a
Yeah.
link to that in the show notes as well, so they can go and have a look around and read a little bit more about it.
Great.
I'll ask you the last question that we ask to everyone who calls
Yeah.
into the show. If there's any existing book that you wish you had been the person to write, what would it be?
Wow. For about 30 years, I taught a horror fiction course in which I used Stephen King's Pet Sematary, and I wish I had written that.
I think it's a good choice. Yeah, can't go wrong
Yeah,
with
it's a great
Stephen
story.
King.
I also wish I had written some Tana French's books, like The Searcher, which I absolutely loved. And so, I mean, I can rattle off a long list. And the third one is The Silence of the Lambs, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Good choices. Good
I mean,
choices.
the only book I know of where the author managed to make sympathetic a psychopathic cannibal in Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. It's a hard work to make a villain sympathetic, but it can be done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Gary, thank you so much for calling in. Have a great afternoon, and
Thanks for having
hopefully
me.
everyone will check out the book. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.